Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Mills. I work for the town manager. This is the first meeting of the Budget Coordinating Group for 2026. We do not have quorum yet, and I am acknowledging that this meeting is being recorded at this time. We will not discuss anything of any substance and wait until we have quorum. Thank you.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, everyone.
Paul, can you hear me? It's Ange.
Yes, yes.
Do you want me to pull in like Shannon Bernacchi is in the attendee room? Do you want her in the panelist room, or do you want Sean and Shannon to sit in the attendee room?
Both come in. Yeah,
Okay.
please. So I think I have to start. I'm going to turn off this thing first.
Yeah.
I made the executive decision to start recording.
Good.
So
And I think, Paul, you have to start, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
we have a quorum yet.
Oh, good point.
Because I was just looking at the definition. The BCG consists of the town manager, representatives of council, elementary, regional schools, and library. And I
Right.
think that's 8 total people right now.
So
And
we have 4.
and we have 4. Does 4 is 4 a majority of 8? I think we need one more.
So the only person who said they weren't going to come was Austin, and Nat was going to come, and Laura Jane was going to come.
And Anna?
Let me, I'll text Laura Jane.
Thank you.
And Sarah, is Anna still representing the regional school committee?
Say that again?
Is Anna still
Yes.
representing the regional school committee?
Yes.
Sounds like Paul's up to date.
Yeah.
Can you text her
I don't
too?
think that changed. Yeah.
So the only action item for today is really the election of a chair. So that might not be able to happen. And I know, Amber, you've got a time constraint at 1 o'clock, I think.
I do. I can be a little more flexible as it
Okay.
turns out. I think 1:30 would be the absolute limit.
Okay. Okay. And Laura Jane had a similar constraint.
Paul, do you want me to call Nat?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank
Okay.
you. There's Anna.
Just emailing you.
Sorry, yeah.
Because
It's
I
like,
don't have your cell phone number. We'll have to write.
oh. I'll send it to you.
Okay. Thank you. So now we have a quorum.
Okay, so we should start. Does the committee want to go elect a chair? Or do you want to hold till we have a better representation of the membership? What do you? Well, we can decide this by consensus, I think.
I think we should wait unless,
Okay. And the only result is that then it's because I call the meeting, it means I have to run this meeting. So it's
Right.
more hand it off. So, but
Aw.
there's not a whole lot on the agenda. So, and we'll keep an eye out for folks. And actually, so thank you all for coming. This is the budget coordinating group. So you know you're on the right flight. They have thank you for joining us, Laura Jane. So this is an information sharing venue. Especially for this meeting, there's no action items other than electing a chair and vice chair. But I think we're going to hold on electing those positions unless this group says we'd like to do it today, maybe to the next meeting or whatever. We just want to get some updates. I think Sean, you want to give updates on sort of health insurance and where we are budget wise, because we have updated budget projections that have been shared with the town's finance committee, but not with this group. And do you have ability to share your screen, Sean?
I don't yet. Could you make me a
Yeah.
co-host here? All right.
And thank you for being with us, Shannon, too.
All right. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So the two updates. One, I think most folks have heard by now, but health insurance premium renewals came in better than previously projected. It doesn't impact these numbers directly because the insurance is budgeted within each department's operating budget, but it does relieve some pressure on those operating budgets. So previously we were anticipating an 18.5% premium increase to our health insurance plans, and then the actual renewal came in at 8.5. And as Paul has said in other places, we had to give something up. The GLP-1s was sort of covered in a more broad way previously. That some of that's been pulled back as part of how they got costs down. And again, I always say it's weird that we feel good about an 8.5% increase. That used to be once upon a time really bad. That would have been a really, we would not have been happy about it. But now that's, the new normal when it comes to health insurance, or at least for the last few years. So that's the health insurance update.
Let me just jump in on there for a second. So, and I note that the Hampshire group is going up 12.5%, which is that's for some of our regional members have that increased. Whoever's in the Hampshire County group.
Right. And once upon a time, we considered joining, or we were trying to join them, and we decided not to.
Sarah?
Yeah, did dropping the GLP-1 coverage is largely responsible for that decrease, or just because that won't happen again next year, and I'm just wondering.
Correct. So their numbers. So Blue Cross stopped covering it for weight loss, it's still available for diabetes and treatments like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the GIC, which is university has and other municipalities are in as well, they dropped it as well. It accounts for about 4 to 5% of our. It's a very large cost. It's a very expensive drug that's widely used. That's the first time there's been a very expensive drug that's been widely used. So. And that was, and when, Maya had done a couple actuarial studies to determine, well, is there a long-term gain by having people on GLP losing weight? People are definitely benefiting from it. And they could not come up through several different accounting firms trying to figure out, is this investment now a wise investment down the road? And they couldn't really come up with like an economic argument to keep it.
All right, so I'll keep going. So we presented initial projections during the financial indicators presentation. Then Finance Committee asked us to come back and update them in February, which we did. So on the revenue side, sorry, I'll start at the top. On the revenue side, we made a couple adjustments. One adjustment we made was we reduced our estimate for new growth. We typically used about 650,000. We dropped that a little bit. And the main reason we dropped that was two things. Our current year new growth came in below expectations. We had budgeted 650 and it came in at about 400,000. So our most recent experience was not positive. And then the fire at Olympia Place will have an impact on what we would have expected in next year's new growth. Likely won't be there. So maybe in a future year, depending on what happens at that site, but it was on track to potentially be in next year's new growth. So we dropped that a little bit. The other area we dropped is investment income. We just kept that flat. We originally projected a $200,000 increase. We're keeping it flat. And again, just being cautious against building operating budgets on revenues that could go away very suddenly is what we're trying to avoid. And so when we look at the history of interest revenue and investment income, there's really been this couple of years where it spiked. Some of that's related to having construction funds on hand. Some of that's related to interest rates actually being up, but that can change very quickly. And so we decided to keep that flat in our projections. Another area we updated was state aid. So when we first did our projections, the governor's budget was not out, but now it is. So we put in the governor's budget figures. Chapter 70 had a very small increase. The charter assessment reimbursement went up quite a bit, but this is always one where it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. If the reimbursement goes up, it means the assessment and the costs, the tuition is also going up generally. So there's it sort of offsets a little bit with the increased cost down below. Our unrestricted general government aid went up a decent amount, and then the other areas were relatively flat. So overall, we're projecting revenue increases of about 3.3%, which is generally where we are, somewhere between 2.5% and 4% is where we see our revenues growing, most years. On the expenditure side, so the Finance Committee, their budget guidelines outlined what to do if revenue projections went up or if some of our expense assumptions or expense projections went down and freed up some money. And before I get to the operating budget, a couple other areas outside the operating budgets that improved, meaning freed up some money, is our retirement assessment. We were projecting a 4% increase and it came in at less than 1% or about 1%. So that freed up a fair amount of funding. And our state assessments, while the charter tuition assessment went up, we saw a pretty big drop in our transportation, our PBTA assessment. And we followed up with them, and what we were told by PBTA is that we're kind of staying flat where other communities are increasing services and becoming a bigger, we're shrinking as a percentage of the system. And therefore our assessment went down a little bit, or actually went down quite a bit. So that's why state assessments, where we originally were projecting a 3% increase, actually they're projected to go down based on the governor's budget, mostly because of that PBTA assessment dropping. So that freed up some funding. And then budget guidelines from Finance Committee also said to keep OPEB funding flat. We had originally projected a $50,000 increase. The guidelines were to keep it flat at $600,000. So the budget guidelines said if there is additional funding available, first to invest in the first year of a plan to improve fire and EMT staffing, which I'll talk about in a second. So there was $200,000 added to the town operating budget to hire at least 2 firefighters. The next thing that the guidelines said was to include the one-time funding in the base that the elementary schools received in FY26. So the $269,704 was brought up and put into the base for calculating the FY27 percentage. And then the last step was then increase everybody proportionally. And so essentially how this works is everyone got a 3.85% increase. and there's additional funding in there for the two firefighters. Now, the funding for the two firefighters is not coming from those revenues I just mentioned. We actually upped how much we're pulling from the ambulance fund. So if you look, that's another area that changed. I forgot to mention the ambulance fund, which is there to support EMTs and the work they do because they generate the money that goes into this fund. We increased that by $200,000 after looking at that fund and talking about fee increases for next year, billing increases for ambulance rides. We felt comfortable raising that 200,000. So the additional funding that's going into the town operating budget for those two firefighters is really from that source, which it really can only be used for that. And so that allowed us to get the numbers that you see on the screen, which is a moderate improvement on where they were when we first projected them back in November.
Thank you, Sean. So questions, Anna?
So my question is about interest estimations.
Sure.
One thing that I think Shannon is doing for us is using a rolling average to sort of project next year's anticipated interest. And so rather than going all the way down to like what, 500K when the previous year was over 2 million, that seems like a really drastic cut to me and really underestimating the actual amount of revenue that we're going to see from interest. I understand that the market right now is really dicey. So I do understand the desire to be somewhat cautious. But what do you think about using like a 3 or 5 year rolling average on interest?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and this one definitely jumps out, so I totally understand that. The region is a little bit different in that they don't have the same type of funds or the amount of funding that we have, right? They're not the region
Yes,
isn't
but
the
the
region
principle
isn't
still
a
applies.
it does, but what I'm saying is the assumptions are different, and that
Yeah.
the region doesn't have borrowing for a new school, for example, that is in their bank accounts. They don't have borrowing for a new library that is in their bank accounts and additional funds for that. So what I want the baseline and the types of funds that are generating that interest are different between the region and the town. And so we did look, and I can show this in a second. If you go back 5 years, you'll see that there were many years where our interest revenue was 100,000 to 300,000, and then 1 year it jumped up really sharply. And that's when we started these construction projects and when interest rates started to go up a little bit. So we can look at an average, but the worst thing we could do is think that this is going to stay when there's pressure on interest rates to go down, build operating budgets based on that, and then have it drop. And then we have this huge hole that we have to dig out of. What we can do with that funding, and what I think we have been doing with that funding, is it can help with capital, right? It can help with capital projects, help invest in roads, help invest in the middle school roof, right? That generates the free cash that then is being appropriated for capital projects. And I think that's a more appropriate use because, again, in my opinion, at this point, these are funds that are not reliable. So we shouldn't build recurring expenses on these funds. We should kind of plan for one-time expenses. Maybe another year or two, we feel differently, but I would say we're still relatively, this is only maybe the third year where it's been elevated, and it's during this time where we've had these construction projects going on. And the other thing with these construction projects is that we've had delays in them too, right? So we haven't been spending money consistently throughout the projects. There was a delay in the school project. There's been a delay in the library project. So that's why we're being cautious in that front.
I think the logic on that, if I understand, Sean, is that it's interest rates that drives one thing, but it's also how much money you have that you're drawing interest on. And that it's been an unusual time because we've had two major capital, $100 million school and a $45 million library. And so we borrow that money up front, we put it into the bank, we earn interest on it. And then that's what drives that number up. And that's what's been happening. So it's the volume, it's the level of money we have invested waiting to be spent on these projects.
And the last thing I'll say is the 500,000 is elevated from where it used to be. So if you look at what we used to budget, and I can send these numbers out, it used to be, I think, 125,000 or somewhere in that range. The 500,000 is already elevated quite a bit from where it was, 4 or 5 years ago.
but it will remain elevated by all anticipated means for a few more years while we're still in a debt borrowing situation for a number of different reasons.
Well, we expect to spend most of the elementary school. So the elementary school is going to open in the
This
fall, right?
fall.
So we're going to spend most of that money on the school between now and the fall. The library is anticipated to open in the spring of 2027. So again, most of the library funding we would anticipate being spent over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Amber.
Yes, I just want to repeat this back to make sure I understand. This is how I learn. So, so what you said about the fact that we have the excess funding for operating, what you're saying is that there's 200K that is set aside for the fire department to hire 2 more firefighters.
Mhm.
And then you're saying, I kind of missed the part what you said about how much the elementary schools are getting, but then every other department will get it equitably, and that will be 4.85% increase instead of what we had originally budgeted.
Yeah, let me that part's confusing because there's like different tiers. Let me say that one more time. So everyone is getting a 3.85% increase.
When you say everyone, who do you mean?
The library, the town, and the 2 school districts. Originally, when we projected in November, the 3.85% increase for the elementary schools was really like a 2.85% increase because the one-time funding wasn't included because it was at that time one-time funding that was funded from a different source last year.
So we are now including.
We are now including that.
The base.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it.
So if you average out what you see for the elementary schools and then the one-time number, which is like a negative, if you average that out, it comes out to a 3.85% increase for the schools. So
Okay.
basically everyone is getting a 3.85% increase. The only difference is there's 200,000 for the 2 firefighters in the town budget coming from the ambulance fund.
Okay, so what is the 4.85 and the 4.5?
So the 4.85, it looks bigger because it's including that one-time funding relative to the base last year that didn't have the 269,704. So if you see the 269,704, that's now rolled into the 29,409 up above. So it looks like a bigger percentage increase, but you really got to add those 2 rows together for FY27. It averages out to a 3.85% increase for the elementary schools. It's a way this was kind of put together last year where we separated out the one-time funding, but now that one-time funding is in the base. So future year increases will be based on that higher starting point.
Okay,
Sarah?
Amber. Yes, Sarah.
I think Sean just said it, but I want to be sure so I can tell other people. So you put the 269,704 into, you added that to FY26 before then grossing
Adding
at
3.85.
3.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Fine. Thank you. Now the firefighters, the 200,000, are you going to do that then on an ongoing basis? Every year you're going to pull 200K from the ambulance fund for these positions, or they'll have to be absorbed?
So the ambulance fund will support at the level that with the additional 200,000 coming out of it. So we look at our ambulance fund and we look at revenues. Again, we have some control over our revenues because we set the billing rates. Now, some of the billing that comes out of the ambulance fund is paid by Medicare, which we don't control. So we might have a billing rate, but Medicare is going to pay what it pays. And so if we say do a 5% increase, we won't realize a 5% increase for that reason. But so we would keep the funding at the 3.2 going forward to support those positions. And there might be, there's going to be a bigger conversation. We're working on a multiple year plan around fire and EMT staffing. This is really sort of the first year piece related to the budget guidelines from Finance Committee.
Okay, you said 3.2. What was the 3.2?
So the 3.2 is if you look at this other financing sources, the amount that's getting pulled from.
Okay.
Yep.
Million, not percent. Okay.
No, sorry. Yeah, 3.2 million.
Okay.
Laura Jane.
Hi, sorry, I was late. just curious about this ambulance fund. Doesn't that hurt the ambulances? I guess I don't really fully understand why we would be taking money out of one critical service to fund another critical service.
No, so this is actually supporting the ambulance. This is supporting EMTs or to hire additional EMTs. So the
So the-
funding is generated for the ambulance fund by basically the trips that EMTs take to bring folks to the hospital back and forth.
Okay.
That goes into a fund, and then every year we appropriate some amount of money out of that fund to support the budget and really to support the EMTs that are in our budget, right? And so what we're saying is we're going to increase that a little bit in order to hire 2 additional EMTs.
EMTs/firefighters?
Yeah,
Okay.
almost all of our positions are hybrid.
And so this is not capital funds that pay for the actual vehicles.
No, that's a good question. So when we look at that fund, this is not, so we look at how much is getting brought in each year, and we plan for that. We do know that roughly every other year we're going to need to buy an ambulance, and that ambulance comes out of this fund as well. And so this is not, we make sure that there's a sufficient buffer there so that we can also pay for the ambulances as well and replace them. So the 2 things the ambulance fund pays for primarily is supporting staffing and replacing the ambulances every other year.
So I apologize for the remedial questions because
No,
this is
that's good.
really, really new
Yep.
to me. But what is the expected income from UMass and the other schools that use our ambulances? How much do they pay us for?
Yeah, so that goes into our ambulance fund. We get about 700,000 from UMass, and we get about, I want to say 250,000-ish from Amherst College, and those both go into the ambulance fund.
And is that enough?
That's what's in our last strategic partnership agreement. So for UMass, that's coming to an end pretty soon. It was a big increase on what they were giving us previously. Whether it's enough, I think, is a discussion and a ongoing conversation, but
It's never enough.
It's never enough. But they, in our last strategic partnership agreement, they increased what they were giving us annually by nearly doubled it. And they also bought us an ambulance, or they're in the process of buying us an ambulance. So their contributions went up quite a bit in the last agreement, again, which is coming up for new conversations in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Yeah, a random question about pilot. Are we part of the conversations, or maybe it's happening at the legislature to rethink how pilot is calculated? I'd love to see some of the UMass buildings taxed because they're like the dorms. The sleeping is not part of the education, right? It's just sleeping and
Right.
living there.
Like
So
the public-private partnership
no,
kind of
no, no,
thing?
that's not what I'm thinking of. Sorry. But Paul, what is it? How are we involved? How is Amherst involved, if at all, in trying to make that better for the town?
Mandy, Joe, do you want to? Is that why you have your hands up? I'm guessing.
It's not, but I will answer that first. Yeah, so Lynn Griesemer from the council is working on creating a coalition throughout the state to do some advocacy around the pilot commission and their work. That commission has not it's in the middle of getting set up, so it has not started its work yet. Senator Comerford is on that commission. We do not know the representative that will be on it because it was going to be Natalie Blais, but she's no longer a representative, so we're not sure who the rep will be on the commission or who the other members are. But so Lynn is working on gathering data. She has reached out to a professor at UMass who has found some interns to help with the data gathering and all, to work to try and form that coalition to make some headway, hopefully, into the pilot commission's work on re-looking at that formula to not just be valuation of state-owned land, the land itself, but also to have that formula consider what is on top of the land and the uses on top of the land, including the buildings and the number of visitors that come. So,
Right.
so we, as a council, we've got someone doing that in the background right now, and monitoring it and trying to find that coalition of the 29 towns and municipalities that have universities, colleges, community colleges, state universities, UMass systems in their towns. So we're working on it from a
Right.
council point.
Great. And is that commission, do they have a deadline for making a recommendation or a report?
Senator Conover said, since it has not actually started its work yet, the legislation may have had a deadline, but she indicated that she fully expects, because it's been delayed in starting, that date will
Slip.
slip a little bit longer so that they still have adequate time to do their work. But we don't have more update than that right now because it hasn't had its first meeting.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And just to add to that, Mandy Jo, before you go to your next, so we met with the senator and representative yesterday, and this is one of the major topics that we talked about. And so with the senator being on the commission, she was very well aware of it. The other thing is, in our strategic partnership agreement with the university, we negotiated in a commitment from them to lobby with us at the State House to increase the pilot money coming into towns and cities and towns, so that they don't want it coming out of their pocket, but they will support us getting more money into the pilot program.
So we're allies for the moment.
Well, for this particular thing, yes.
Yes.
Until further, all right, okay.
Yes.
Mandy Jo, you had your hand up on something else.
Yeah, I had a question about the state retirement assessment. Is it's not quite level, but in dollar amounts, it seems level in the scheme of things at a $58,000 increase this year. Is that based more on just when we counted numbers of employees, like it was a couple years ago when we were basically level, or is this more of seeing a adjustment because of the actuarial standards and where we're going to fully fund it?
Yeah, I'd say all of the above. So the way the retirement assessment works is they get aggregate salaries of Hampshire County eligible employees every October from every town in the system. And that's how they apportion the assessment. So we could be at a low point with our salaries, and another town could be adding a bunch of positions, and that would drop our percentage. It could be vice versa, where we've added some positions and other towns have, made reductions, and that would increase our percentage. So that's a factor every year, is how much big we are relative to other towns. But in general, the funds needed every year is starting to slow down. They've reduced the annual increases. It used to be, close to 9-10% every year. They reduced it down to 4%, and now it's starting to scale back even more. So, they are in this like almost fully funded phase over the next 7 years, where I think we'll see these increases. Maybe not always this low, and I know last year was pretty low, but I would expect to see them in the sub 5% range, which is much better than where it was for many, many years, where it was always like 7, 8, 9%. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Mandy? Okay.
Thank you.
And I just mentioned that Sean is an elected representative to the board of the retirement system, so he gets all the inside information.
Yeah. Public meeting, so you're welcome to go. We have never had a member of the public, but you're welcome to go.
Other questions, comments? Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is to look at free cash and excess and deficiency. So Sean, you want to talk about free cash?
Paul, I mean, this is up to Shannon. Shannon and I did speak, and I don't know, Shannon, I think school budget updates were on here as well.
Do you want to do school budget? Okay, that'd be great.
If Shannon's ready, I think she and I spoke, and we were going to each do kind of a high level update.
Okay. Yeah, I think I messed that up. Okay. Shannon?
Okay. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you will be.
Okay.
You got it?
Yes. So I just took I don't know where everybody went.
Oh, we're here and we can see what you're sharing.
Okay. So I took information from our last presentation to Amherst School Committee and just did a quick little tidbit of what's going on. And then the same for the region. So at our last meeting, I believe was it last Tuesday, the 24th? I don't remember. We presented the consolidation of staffing that's happening when we close the two buildings, move into Amethyst Brook, and then have Chestnut Street Academy along with Crocker Farm. So we began putting together what that will look like in terms of staffing and what efficiencies we might have because of that. But this was also subject to change based on the students that decide to go to their established school rather than their rezoned school, because that option was given to them. And so we did have a survey go out, and we received most responses back, and we're now working on, with that information, refining this further. In terms of our budget, our health insurance, as you all know, was down to 8.5%. We still have school choice applied, circuit breaker, some UMass Fund, and Amherst College Fund. We're in our second year of our transportation. And the staffing plan that we submitted on the page before has a net savings of 797,000, but that's subject to change again as we're refining with the updated information from the surveys and just continued discussions that we've been having last week and this week. So it's not finalized. And with that information, we put that into the operating budget from just to look at it as a very high level of where that leaves us in terms of a reduction. At the time that I had presented this to Amherst School Committee, we did not have the update of the 3.85 or 4.85 with the 1% included in the base. So that's not reflected on here. And we haven't made that presentation to school committee, so I wasn't prepared to present that today. But with the savings and the efficiencies from the consolidation at the 3.5%, it was 573,000 still remained in a deficit. Moving along really quick to region. The region budget, again, health insurance went down to 8.5%. We removed the contracted maintenance for the track and fields from the operating budget, as the town of Amherst is graciously going to help support funding that for the first year or two. There was an increase that I made to our charter assessment based on the preliminary estimates that were posted on DESE. I still have not received the actuals for Q2 on the DESE security portal. They are not been updated, and I've been reaching out about that. We have 850,000 of school choice applied, and our circuit breaker and IDA funds have already been accounted for in this budget. And with that operating budget at the bottom here, 39.9 million, we plug that into the top of our revenue sheet. And it would, well, I'll go through this first. We have our operating budget at the top, our estimate for Chapter 70, transportation reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement, charter reimbursement. We've increased the interest revenue, as Anna was mentioning earlier, and an increase to our E&D because we are at the top of the scale of the max we can have in the E&D. So it's in our best interest to increase more for the operating budget at this time. And then we have the assessments down here for the town, which would result in a reduction of 1.1 million. And this graph and the last one I had on the budget hearing docs for the regional school committee, which was postponed to March 10th. But the documents were already public for a while now, so that's why I included those, although I have not presented to the school committee on this yet. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And I don't intend in this meeting to go through the budget adjustments and additions and reductions, but I wanted to show that we had already started to work towards that deficit. If it's under budget adjustments, it's a change in funding source, not a reduction. Budget additions are an add, and then budget reductions are down here below. So that's my quick update, and I'm happy to answer questions. And Sarah, I know you patiently had your hand up.
Thanks, Shannon. Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that the Amherst School Committee, what Shannon was showing is not a draft budget. We have not yet received a draft budget. It's a like draft, pre-draft.
Yeah, very high level.
Very, very high level, way above my level, but yes. So soon we'll have to get the draft budget. So.
Yes, oh, sorry. Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
So just so everybody on the call is aware, March 10th is the Regional School Committee budget hearing, and March 17th is the Amherst School Committee budget hearing. We anticipate that the documents for the Amherst budget hearing will be posted by March 10th, 7 days prior, and the regional budget hearing documents are already posted.
In the Four Towns meeting, Shannon?
That is March 14th.
Boy. Okay. And that's at 9 a.m. at the middle school.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Mary Jo.
Yeah, Shannon, I was just wondering, or maybe Anna, who's the regional rep here, when does the region actually have to vote its budget based on the Four Towns meetings and the timing before that? So relative to when the first hearing is, what's the date that the budget needs voted?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know it's in an email between Sarah Bess and I. And I just have to, because I physically counted the days based on the estimate of the town meetings.
It's
but
definitely in March. It's
Yeah,
definitely
it's
March 25th.
Yeah.
Quick turnaround.
Yeah, I was curious because it's normally sometime in like mid-ish March, so I was curious what that was. March
It's like
25th.
I think it's like 60 days or something like I can't remember if it's 45 or 60 days, but the reality is we have to have it voted by March 20. Oh. Is Shutesbury the first one? Yeah, anyway, I think it's March 25th.
Yeah, there was a posting error or for the hearing, so that's why it didn't happen.
We were going to have one, but now we're having one on the 10th. So it's still happening. It's just happening a little bit later than we had wanted it to happen. It turns out that posting it on Board Docs is not adequate, and we have to post it in the newspaper too.
Yeah. There's so many different places you have to post. Yeah. Okay. Other questions for Shannon? Anything else you want to share, Shannon? We're good.
No, not at this time, but I would encourage everybody that kind of tend to watch the budget hearing meetings.
Could I just ask one other thing?
Sure.
Or just to ask Shannon, I understand it, but in case people are looking at this and don't necessarily understand the difference on that regional document you showed, you had a assessment required number, and then you had a additional use of E&D number, which is sort of new this year. Can you talk about that difference and what the plan is going forward with those two in terms of the differences in money, but also bases or budgets and all of that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Thanks.
So because at the end of fiscal year 25, our E&D was certified and it was above the maximum amount of 5% that we could have in E&D. That was partly due to our interest revenue being significantly higher than what was originally projected for the revenue. We had to take a vote. Well, I had to present the option to the regional school committee to vote whether to reduce the FY26 assessments of the towns or to reduce the FY27 assessments of the town. And I had recommended that we do it for FY27 and not alter the FY26 at this point. It would just be a smoother process. And so when you looked at that sheet, I can just share this again really quick. So when you look at this sheet down here at the bottom, where it says Amherst, Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury, these are the assessments. It will be the base in here, but those bases will be reduced in proportion. The amount that's over is 151,000. So Amherst will ultimately pay $120,000 less than this, and then same with Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury. Pelham is 8,000, Leverett 11,000, Shutesbury 12,000. So this, I don't anticipate that next year we would have this. So it's a one-time thing because of our E&D being over the 5%.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Since we're on, do you want to just mention what is your balance in E&D now? Shannon, I think you have.
So the maximum we can have, it's just about 1.8 million. The number changes every year because it depends on what your operating budget is for that year, and it also takes into account the budget. So for when I certify FY26 E&D, it'll take in consideration FY26 information and the FY27 operating budget. So right now, as of FY25, it was 1.8. We were just over the 1.8 by 151,000. So if you were to take that out, just say we have 1.8. We are using 880 to support the operating budget for FY26. 280,000 of that 880 is a contingency. If we needed to use it, for instance, if we were going to be over budget for any reason in the book possible, we could use that. If we don't, then that'll also roll back into our E&D. So that's why we call it a contingency. For FY27, we are planning to use 1,080,000 of E&D just because we're already approached at that cap that we want to utilize some of that. So if we have 1.8 and next year we're using 1.80,000, it's like 900,000 in there. But so any overage, let me just speak to this really quick. Anytime when you look at our revenue sheet and we have the transportation reimbursement, the Medicaid reimbursement, the charter, the interest, we budget a specific amount. So how does the E&D account build? It builds if the transportation reimbursement comes in higher than the reimbursement, or vice versa. If the reimbursement is lower than what we budgeted, then there would be nothing rolling into the E&D, and instead that would be having to use money to support the budget because of that. And then same thing for all of the different revenue sources that are listed on there. So it's hard to tell you an exact number in the moment, but the exact number we get is when we certify it.
Got it. Yes, understood. Okay. Andy, jump.
So if I want to word this slightly differently and tell me if I'm wrong on how E&D builds. E&D also builds when the revenues you have in general, including the assessments the towns pay, are higher in a fiscal year than the expenses you actually paid in your budget. Is that correct?
I don't know that it's correct by saying the town's assessments are included in that. We receive an exact amount of the town's assessment, and we support. I guess that's kind of a tricky way to put it. So, say the budget, just for a quick number, our budget is $1,000, and that includes all of our revenue, all of the town's assessments. And we had $100 that was our contingency of E&D, and we wanted to make sure that $100 rolls into E&D. We would want our budget to come under at $900, and that 100 rolls in. But I don't think it would be an accurate way to say that anything that the town pays rolls into that.
I guess let me reword it. If your budget is $1,000, that means your expense budget is $1,000, say, even if it
Right.
includes 100 contingency. But if you actually, in an actual year, spent $800, 200 goes into E&D. Then is that correct?
Oh, I guess, yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, then yeah. So, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
That's okay. Good. Okay. Sean, anything else you want to add before we go to comments?
Do you want me to do free cash real quick?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
So free cash works very similar to how E&D works, and it's a similar process where Shannon and I both have to submit all this information to the state and get it certified. And I'm sure Shannon, is equally frustrated filling out all the spreadsheets every year and making sure 12 different spreadsheets tie out to each other and matches our accounting system. So very similar process, but we finished FY25 with $10.2 million of free cash. That, as you guys just discussed, comes from both the revenue side of the budget and the expense side of the budget. And a big chunk of that 10.2 was from the closeout of ARPA, which was about $4 million of it, just spending out the remaining ARPA funds, which we knew would go to free cash. And some of that ARPA money had already been spent because there was an appropriation the year before for the Bang Center to do renovations to that space. So of that 10.2 million, there's an order in front of the council right now to appropriate everything essentially that's above 5% and to keep 5% in free cash, which is consistent with our financial policies. And so the appropriation request that's in front of the council is to move some money to opioid settlements related to what we received and reimbursements, to move some money into a reparation stabilization fund. The big one is I think where we're at right now is to appropriate $1.6 million for the middle school roof and to appropriate $2.7 million to roads and sidewalks. And then there's another appropriation, as Shannon mentioned, for maintenance of new fields at the high school. And then there's a youth empowerment piece of money that we're leaving aside for now until there's a plan to spend it. So that gets us to remaining free cash balance when everything is said and done of about 5.2 million, which is roughly 5% of our operating budget.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah. So I would say the school committees are learning more about free cash. And I mean, I'm here for Amherst, not the region, but certainly very much support everything Amherst does for the region in particular with free cash. But I always feel as a committee member behind the 8 ball on the free cash. And like by the time I hear about it, it's like almost too late to propose anything. So I'm wondering whether what the state certifies for free cash is close to what you think it's going to be when you submit all your spreadsheets. And if that is the case, perhaps the town could give the school committees a heads up as like, look, if it's certified, we think there might be this much above the 5% or, or whatever that might be available. So start thinking, but no promises. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. And I'll let Paul speak to this. I'm trying to frame this. It's not like CPA money or Joint Capital Planning Committee where there's like, give us all the requests, right? That's not generally how free cash has been handled. There's our financial policies say keep free cash at 5%. If there's anything above that 5%, bring it to general stabilization and keep that at 10%. If there's anything above 10%, bring it to capital stabilization, which we're building up to help support a new fire station and possibly the DPW. And really what the town manager brings forward to the council are deviations from those sort of steps, right? And it's usually deviations to further a stated goal of the council. So usually roads was really the big one, roads, right? This year, we knew about the field situation and conversations with the schools, right? So so that one's a little bit unique this year. But I wouldn't say it's not like a request window where we solicit requests for how to use free cash. There is sort of a approach to it, and then I think the town manager year to year decides whether he's going to recommend something to address a specific goal of the council.
Can I
May
say
I
we
also
probably,
respond, Paul?
It's okay, Sarah. Do I?
I understand, that. I think it would still be nice to be able to ask, because I feel like other requests do come forward, and I totally understand that council might say, or the town manager, sorry, we already said what we wanted.
Right.
But we've also been told, and now speaking, particularly as Amherst, that, hey, if you have unexpected and maybe this is a different pot of money, you got unexpected capital needs come up during the year, come talk to us. Like, so maybe these are different processes, but
Yeah, I guess that piece, if there's emergencies that pop up during the year, definitely. That's why we keep the 5% in free cash, is for mid-year emergencies.
Mhm.
I can't remember. I want to say there might have been an appropriation once upon a time from free cash working with the town for a boiler at one of the schools that when I was in the schools that died unexpectedly. I know there's been appropriations for like the Station Road Bridge from free cash when that bridge
Mhm.
so that's really what that 5% is for. And $5 million sounds like a lot of money, but these things add up pretty quickly. Like that bridge, I think was $2 million-ish alone. So yeah, emergencies, especially, particularly at the elementary school level. At the regional school, it's a different process, but at the elementary school level, if there's an emergency that pops up, then
Yeah.
and I think we generally do discuss those things, but I'll restate it now so that it's clear.
Yeah. So, and I think we should say it's about the elementary school because that's where free cash comes from. So, Laura Jane, is this on this topic, or should I go to Mandy Jo Mandy Jo?
Yeah, no, I just
No,
wanted to.
it was on this topic,
Oh,
but
okay,
Okay,
Laura
so
Jane, you
Laura
can
Jane,
go.
then you should go next.
well, no, Mandy Jo, go for it, and then I'll say.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to expand on Sean's based on my service on finance committee the last 2 years, where the budget guidelines from the council to the manager have started including, if we do guidelines for FY, the ones we passed in December were for FY 27, but they actually addressed the FY the next year's free cash one. So and because this free cash was certified so late, they kind of addressed this one too. And so those we're starting to address, if there's free cash after free cash is certified, here's how we would like you to distribute it, Paul. And in that, this year in December, those budget guidelines from the council actually said, in not necessarily directly to free cash, but actually did say, hey, if the regional school committee potentially asks for additional funding for the middle school auditorium roof, can, be prepared to bring us a financial order that could be from the certified free cash. And in fact, and in some sense, if the school committee asks for it. So if you're looking for timing on when to potentially say, hey, council manager, how do we get involved in distributing free cash or onto that? When the council is discussing its budget guidelines, commenting on that guideline and that portion of the guideline that says, here's what we want you to do with free cash certified if there's anything excess after these 4 things, is a great time to start the school committee coming in and saying, maybe you could put this into that distribution, because that's really where we send it to roads, or do this with it. So that would be a good time for contributing to that conversation, is during the council's budget guidelines discussion for the next guideline year, because that's what Paul has been the last couple of years looking to when he's proposed those financial orders.
So just to reinforce that we pay very close attention to the town council's budget guidelines and try to align everything with those. Sometimes there's an unusual thing, like when the fields came up, because we saw that was a new ad and we really needed to figure out how to address that. So, okay. Laura Jane, thank you for your patience.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just wondering, since there's going to be $5 million in free cash, which is way more than 5% of the 10 million. Because right, you were saying you have to hold 5% of the 10
It's
million back
it's
from
5% of
revenues.
our operating budget, which is 100 million.
Okay. So you have to hold 100 million back.
No, no.
No, so the total free cash was 10 million, which is roughly 10% of our operating budget. We've brought forward appropriation requests to spend about half of that, or
Okay.
transfer about half of that, which will leave 5 million, which is 5% of the operating budget.
So that 5 million is protected and not
It
touchable?
it's there as a reserve, like I said, for mid-year emergencies that may pop up. Um, and so it kind of stays there, and it's only available from the time that free cash is certified until the end of the fiscal year, and then it has to get recertified again. But it's there. It's there for appropriation, but our financial policies sort of put it there for emergency situations or unexpected needs.
So unexpected needs include things like, oh, we're going to have to make major cuts to the district or
So
the
it's not a
because
recurring
of the
revenue
insurance
source.
side.
Yeah.
Right. No, I that I
Yeah.
get. I guess
Yep.
I'm just wondering, like, I know you said it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it is a significant amount of money, especially when we're comparing it to like how much money the school district is behind in our, it's not level funded if we have to cut 1.8% or whatever, 1.8 million, which I know is not the total that we're actually going to have to cut, but it's close. And so I'm wondering about things like that Bridget has brought up before, like putting in solar fields at the Amherst schools, so that we can defray utility costs down the road for the town and for the district, right? Which are the same thing, right? I mean, I know people talk about the district like it's separate from the town, but really, Amherst is the Amherst schools and the region are all part of the town. So it's like they aren't really as separate as we talk about sometimes. I'm just wondering about, like, can we do something like that? Can we suggest, a $2 million investment in capital to get solar fields put in at all of the parking lots across the Amherst schools to defray
Yeah.
utility
No,
costs?
that's a good question. So the first thing I would politely push back on is that the region and the town they are separate. The region is a separate standalone entity, has its own bank accounts, its own tax ID number. It really is owned by all four towns, and its budget is supported by all four towns. And so I know it's physically located in Amherst, but it is separate from the town in every way possible.
Sorry,
Whereas much legally,
except for the fact that every resident who has children who send their school children to the Amherst schools, that is part of the school. So like, I understand that you're talking about fiscally, but like really, these things should not be thought of as separate in the same way that we think of them separately because they are used by Amherst residents in the same way that like the roads are used by Amherst residents. So I mean, we can, I know we don't have time
yeah,
for this
I guess what
particular
I would say
debate, but
is it was a
yeah.
partnership that was agreed to by four towns, and Amherst wanting to. So I won't go down there. I was concerned about the roof and the town paying all of it, and not because ultimately that reduces long term, I think, how much funding is available for the region, and that's not a good thing for the region. Um, but to your other question, so I wouldn't recommend a project like that coming out of the 5% because I think it's important to have that safety net in case something pops up during the year. To what Mandy Jo said about when budget guidelines are set, that might be the time to raise something like that, to come out of the excess, because every year we generally have some excess. It's not guaranteed, but the past several years we've had excess. So, but what I'll say is, and this is just me as finance director, right? And Shannon probably feels the same way at times. There's a lot of requests on how to spend these funds, right? We have a fire station, we have a public works facility, we have roads, and so the more, once upon a time, the senior center was raised as a need, right? And so the council will need to give clear guidance to the town manager on how to the priorities for the funding.
Great. Okay, Laura Jane. Okay. Amber?
Yeah, I just had a question that's going to be really quick, actually, as I'm trying to learn about the town finances and the various accounts we have. So the excess 5 million in free cash, like what account will that sit in for the year? Like just in case, if we need to.
Yeah, so free cash is it's another way of like saying undesignated fund balance. So it's the undesignated fund balance of our general fund, which is accounting speak for our general fund. It's like it's not appropriated, but again, it's only available from the time free cash is certified, which is usually earlier than it was this year, until June 30th. And then from June 30th until we recertify it, it's not available. So we really have this window every year, usually November, December, where we look at these supplemental appropriations.
And in the general fund, is there additional money in the general fund? Like what's the balance of our general fund, just generally speaking?
The general fund is where all the budgets live, right? So that's where all these operating budgets that those expenses that I showed you on that projection sheet, that is the general fund. So this is really the only other piece of the general fund is the free cash.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Do you mean like, is it in a bank account, like sitting in a bank?
Yeah, it's not like a fund in the same sense of like the stabilization fund or the general or the capital stabilization fund or revolving funds. Like it's not a separate fund number in that way. It is our general fund. But it's in our bank accounts the same way other money is.
But we track it every year, and so Sarah.
So I have a question about the window that Sean just mentioned. It's unclear because and Anna doesn't mind, I put my regional hat on for the moment. If all 4 towns are going to contribute to, let's say, a capital project, the calendars are all out of sync. Like if town council has to decide how to dispose or whether to dispose of some excess free cash, let's say by end of January, and ran into this with the middle school roof, the other towns literally cannot afford to call a special town meeting to decide whether they want to participate in that. They could decide at their Springtown meetings. So I'm wondering, like, is it really ever feasible, this roof thing aside, thank you again, for the region to say, we're going to come at all 4 towns with this special capital request. Amherst, we'd like to, your free cash for it, but the other towns, we're not going to hear from them one way or another. Is that ever going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, it could. So I'm guessing the other towns are not certifying their free cash before their fall town meeting. So, but they could. So generally capital projects go through the regional agreement in the way that specifies. But assuming we wanted to do something different using free cash, the council doesn't, like, we generally act on free cash in October, November, December, because that's right after it gets certified. If the council wanted to and the town manager wanted to, that vote could happen in May, or it could happen in April. And the smaller, the other towns could take it up at their Springtown meeting from their free cash, because by that point they should have their free cash certified and be considering different orders.
I think the thing, if I can just jump in here, Sarah, is that we really want to have one capital project process a year, and that's when we should be aligned with our town annual budgets, when the annual town meetings are. Yeah, and then these other funds, and it's the council has also told us to be tighter with our projections, so we anticipate that those numbers will be smaller in the future, because that's been a directive to the council to create more money, like what Sean just announced. We can have additional funds coming in.
Right. So maybe this won't happen again.
But I think
just because the roof project is underway.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's the time to weigh in is during the financial guidelines, and those are done after the financial indicators report is done in November. And so that's it. I think November, December is really the time frame to be engaged, and we'll have a sense of where our free cash is going to be. And so I think that's a really active time to be thinking about things that we should be considering, or the council should be considering in its guidelines.
Thank you.
Anna?
I just wanted to mention that not all towns have a fall town meeting.
Mm.
Most towns have a spring town meeting. Some towns have a fall town meeting. I'd say all towns have a spring town meeting or summer town meeting. So somewhere between April and May, I think, is generally the case. I think most of them are in May right now.
Mhm.
Not all towns have an additional town meeting. And I think Shutesbury just voted to have a December town meeting annually. So we will be having two town meetings, but I believe Leverett does not. They only have one, and I don't know about Pelham. So just to put that out there, a fall town meeting is not on the books necessarily.
That's good to know. Thank you. Mary Jo?
I'm sorry, I have to go. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no, thank you for giving us extra time.
Okay.
I think this conversation highlights the importance of, in particular, the regional school committee thinking ahead about its capital and really looking at its capital allocation that it puts forth within its budget for annual town meeting. Because even something like the middle school roof could have been foreseen and included in that request back now in making the request for this coming July, say, although maybe that would be too late, but thinking about those things ahead of time, because the towns may operate differently, and even did when Amherst didn't have a town council. We always had at least 2 town meetings a year, an annual and a special fall, and even if others didn't. And so I think that's something that's important for the regional school committee to take into consideration, is the fact that there are 4 towns that are part of the region do operate on slightly different timelines with slightly different willingnesses to potentially consider calling special town meetings or not. I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that the region can pass borrowing at any time, and the towns then have 60 days to decide whether to reject it. But after 60 days, if they have not rejected it, it is adopted, which means the towns don't actually have to call a special town meeting if they want to accept that borrowing, because it's pocket accepted without a formal rejection. And so planning ahead for those cases is something that we as a town try to do with our financial guidelines and our budget guidelines, looking forward and saying, hey, what's coming up in the next year? Here's what we'd like to see you use that free cash for. And I think it's important for all 4 elected bodies that are represented here, although the librarian missed this one today, but to look at those capitals, not just 2 months in advance, not just 6 months in advance, but more than a year in advance, and say, what are we going to need in the next year? And how do we, especially for a region, put that into our capital plan for the annual town meetings?
I think that's a really good point. I think, Sarah, so I think the things that you're bringing up about, or that members of this school committee are bringing up about solar panels, which all make sense, I think it really needs to be part of our process to think about, because there are, or maybe Laura J brought that up, a win-win situation there in terms of, but it is really something that should be in our normal budget process.
I think we may have made the region creating trouble. Well, the difference is the free cash, asking for free cash versus passing a borrowing. I mean, those are really, really different. And Mandy Jo's correct about the borrowing route, but going for free cash, that's where there's no easy mechanism or ready mechanism for involving all 4 towns. So maybe that's just not a thing we ought to be thinking about very, very much. So.
Yeah, I mean, we as the financial officers, I think Shannon and Sean would agree. We're trying to drive. The best thing is to have everything accounted for and looked at and considered at the same time. So we're not prioritizing one thing because we took it out of turn. Everything's on the table. We can see what we can afford, and then here's the next in place, which is what the council did with their budget guidelines. They said, if you have more money, here's how we want you to allocate it, which is what we've done. Anna.
So I think there is some movement to reopen the regional agreement
Mm.
and massively update it because it hasn't been re-looked at for many decades. And there's language in the regional agreement that just like no longer applies because the Amherstown government has changed
Yeah.
and many other things within the regional agreement that are just outdated.
Mm.
One thing that we might consider moving forward is how the different four towns are expected to deal with free cash.
Mm.
And if there's free cash, a mechanism for funneling at least some of that excess free cash into the regional school system and not just into the town systems. Because if the idea is to sort of apportion a percentage of free cash into various different pots and not just one pot, then being able to apportion a small amount of that free cash directly into the regional budget could be very helpful. I think that Shutesbury's guidance generally funnels all free cash into capital stabilization. And so it would be a longer conversation about how to handle free cash, but it is possible to think about that for adjustments to the regional agreement.
I mean, I think the regional agreement should be, we've been asking that since the charter changed. And so, but it is time to do it. You're right. And I know the attorneys looked at it, town's attorneys looked at it as well. And so they're making some adjustments to it. But I think thinking about how, well, for the region, it's E&D, how that money it gets redistributed is a valuable thing to put, it could be put in that agreement as well. So. Okay, so nobody from the library here. We don't, if there's anything, so we usually call these meetings when there's a change. And so what's been changed was the stuff that, health insurance and the new projection. If we have any other changes that will happen in the budget and we don't anticipate any, there's nothing new unless the state does something massively out of whack with where we are, but they are usually acting after we've all approved our budgets. So if there we'll call a BCG meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Amber, go ahead.
I was just going to say goodbye. I have to run to my next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I quickly ask?
Sure.
You said we should postpone electing a chair. What is the advantage of postponing, and when do you propose to do that now?
That's a good question. So we chose not to do that because there are so few people on the call, and we had nobody
That's
from the
totally,
library.
yeah, that makes sense.
And so so at the time being, so under our charter, I call the meeting to order, and then the first item on my agenda was to elect a chair. So I think next time we have one,
Okay.
that
Sounds great.
Okay. Public comment. Members of the public are able to make comments. Is there anybody in the public who would like to make a comment up to 3 minutes? You can do that by raising your hand. We have 2 members of the public who are present. I don't see any hands raised. Topics not reasonably anticipated. I don't have any. Does anybody else have any that they would like to bring up? Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn, or I'll make the motion to adjourn at
Second.
second. Okay. Mary Jo?
Hi.
Sarah?
Hi.
Anna?
Aye.
Paul? Not a quorum.
Well, then we're not even meeting.
We adjourned when Amber left. Great.
Bye.
Thank you all. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.